What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Gary's Basement, your one-stop shop for everything hockey. Today we are doing part 2 of our coverage of the Metropolitan Division. Today we'll be covering the teams, the New York Rangers, Philadelphia Flyers, Pittsburgh Penguins, and Washington Capitals. We've got some intriguing teams to dive into today, and we will kick it off in the Empire State with the New York Rangers celebrating, I believe, their centennial this year. So thoughts on the offseason and this year's approach to this season?
The New York Rangers had a rough season, have had a couple of rough seasons since, well, no, it's just the one, I guess, sorry. Just the one season since the President's Trophy winning season and their fall off, the joke's real, should be studied. The New York Rangers did not really get rid of anybody. I think the biggest issue that the Rangers have had is injuries. Injuries have always been a big problem. They lost Igor Shesterkin for a good portion of last season. He's really good still, but not as good as he used to be. And you can't rely on Jonathan Quick. Jonathan Quick's in his final contract, and I don't know if the Rangers are going to sign him again. Can't rule it out. I think Quick still has some years left, but he's also not the goaltender he used to be. He's 39 years old, so for an NHL goalie, that's pretty old. And I think this is probably it for Quick. Question will be, where are they going to get the goaltending? Because the Rochester Americans do have some options for them goaltending wise. So keep that in mind. The New York Rangers are going to have to be flexible in the goaltending market this year, which is atrocious in the NHL. And maybe they try and go see if they can get an AHL and maybe have a go for an AHL up there if Igor Shesterkin becomes injured again, which is always a possibility. The biggest thing for the Rangers this year is going to be staying healthy.
Yeah, I think the goaltending isn't a super big concern. Shesterkin had a shaky year last year and a less consistent year, I guess, than what we were used to seeing. But if you're the Rangers, you've kind of committed to Shesterkin at this point. You're putting a lot of money and a major contract into Shesterkin. So you've kind of made him, he won't be tradable or movable at all for the next few years at least, because no one's going to want to take on that contract off a trade. So you pretty much committed to Shesterkin as your number one. Quick, in my opinion, isn't a terrible backup. He's actually played pretty well considering his age. I think Quick is a solid backup. I think you can get some good games out of him. Obviously, it's very soon that you have to be thinking who's going to be the backup, because Shesterkin, I don't think you want to put too heavy of a workload on if you want to keep him healthy. So I think you need a solid backup, which I think Quick can still be that this year. I think he needs some help, though. Last year, even, Shesterkin wasn't bad. Had under 3 goals against average, which isn't terrible, but offensive production was lacking compared to the last few years. And yeah, I mean, you still got the bigger guys contributing. Lafreniere has been a major disappointment. A few years ago, you had Lafreniere and Jack Hughes in a discussion, a number of years ago at this point, in discussion for first overall. It's very clear who the better player of that draft has been. Lafreniere has, some people would consider him a bust, so yeah, hopefully a bounce back year if you're the Rangers for Lafreniere, because it was not a great year this past year. And you need people like him to step up, that kind of younger core for the Rangers, to kind of help out people like Panarin and those, I guess you could call them older guys at this point.
Yeah, and I think talking about the goaltending, you got to highlight their defense. Of course, you got Adam Fox. He'll be a top 5 D-man in the league for a while, I see it. He's a great defenseman. You add the likes of Gavrikov from the Kings, picking him up in free agency, getting Morrow as well. He didn't do too much in the NHL. He was in the AHL a lot last season. But what he did in the NHL, 9 or 6 points in 15 games. So as a defenseman, that's pretty good. But also the young talent of Gabe Perrault, I don't know how they say it, playing at Boston College last year for most of the season, put up 48 points in 37 games at Boston College, only was able to play 5 games for the Rangers. But I think he could be a great piece. I think that's young talent coming up. I think he'll play great next season. I could see him being a good offensive piece to this team and somebody that can help out this New York Rangers team, especially with the likes of JT Miller on that second line. I see, looking at their projected lines right now, they haven't penciled in as a second liner. I think he'd really eat that up and grow there with playing with a player like JT Miller. JT Miller, again, they got him last season. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that would be correct.
Yeah,
He only played 32 games, but yeah.
and I mean, I think that's been a really good pickup. JT Miller's still a really good player. He's 32. Having around the board, you have a lot of long contracts. You have some that are closer to the end expiring, but some contracts that you might, as a fan and even as not a fan of the Rangers, you could look at and be like, I don't know how they're going to be 5 years down the road when their contract ends.
Yeah, and I think the contract situation, you kind of locked a lot of these guys long term because you thought you were in a good spot for the Rangers. You thought you were a contender, and you kind of locked down this roster for a while. And then the pretty quick fall off for the Rangers, similar to what we kind of saw from Boston, that kind of complete turnaround. Not as bad of a drop off as Boston, but a similar, just kind of went from cup contender and top of the preseason predictions the last few years to this past year not being all that great. And I think that has kind of put them in a tough spot contracts wise, because these guys are now kind of underperforming for the money they put down for these guys.
I just want to quick turn to the stats a little bit. First off, talking about JT Miller, incredible. I mean, if he keeps what he was going with the last season, keeps it going, he had only 32 games played and was 7th in points on the team in just 32 games. The people around him had 82, 82, 82, 74, 82, 80 games played. So he only got 32 in there, and he still is sitting 7th on the team for points, which is a really good thing to see for going forward. But then other things I see are Fox with 51 assists, which is crazy in itself. And then you have Panarin with 52. That's 100 assists between two players. And not to even talk about Zibanejad with 42, 33. There's lots of assists going around here, and it's just a very well-rounded team compared to some of the teams that we've been talking about lately. I mean, the top 6 players top out the last at least 4 teams we've talked about in points per game and just points in general. So stats wise, they're not looking bad. I would like to see some more pickups. I mean, you got a defender at the 3rd spot for points. A lot of those do come from assists, but still, you got a defender at the 3rd in points. So spread those out like they are and get a couple more guys into that as well.
I think the Rangers find themselves in a very interesting position going into this next year. We said it with some of the other teams we talked about in last episode of the Metropolitan. I see the Rangers being kind of that kind of another wild card in this Metropolitan Division. You could see them underperform or overperform expectations. It's hard to predict where they're going to go based on last year. Everyone thought they were going to be way better last year, and they underperformed. So it'll be interesting to see if they can live up to any of those expectations. Also interesting to see kind of what that looks like in the Metropolitan with all the other teams moving up and down. Where do the Rangers finish in this division? But we will discuss that later on in the episode. Now switching to a team that's in quite a different situation. Rangers kind of middle of the pack. We've switched over to the Philadelphia Flyers, who find themselves toward the bottom of the division. But some positives coming out of Philadelphia if you're a Flyers fan in the kind of rebuild, I guess you could say, that the Flyers are in, and some changes that could be good.
I mean, first off, you got to talk about the big move. They got Trevor Zegras, which I think will be a huge thing for them, getting another big name, big scorer on this team. They only have two guys over 50 points, at least last year. I mean, so to get somebody who with some firepower on the offense will be a good thing for them to do.
Yeah, and looking at this team, they don't have too much age, which can be a good thing. Of course, you have to see how that pans out. You got players like Couture, he'll still be performing. You have a player like Michkov on the other side of the age lookout. Matvei Michkov, 63 points in 80 games played last season. First year in the NHL, putting up 60 points is very solid. You, of course, do have Zegras. Of course, he's on his last year of the deal, so you'll have to re-sign him down the road pretty soon here. But I think they need to still do some stuff. They need to get, especially on the defensive end, I don't see anything that really makes you defensive end completely, goalies and defense. You're not like, wow, that's the offense. You could say there's potential there. Defense, it definitely needs to get better, and I think you need to go see them go hopefully get a defenseman because you like where you're at. You're in a rebuild, and I think you're on the way out of that rebuild. I think you're getting towards being a contender in the playoffs, being a contender to make the playoffs. And I think that's really exciting if you're a Flyers fan.
Yeah, I think the Flyers, you have a lot of positives. Might not want to hear it, but it's probably not this season positives that you will see, but it's getting closer. This team, I think they're doing a pretty good job of building up their younger core. They've got some prospects coming up in the system and already getting guys like Michkov, who had a very good start to his stint with the Flyers. Adding Zegras to the mix will be an interesting situation to see how he can fit here in Philadelphia. But kind of the good thing, bad thing is you have him just for this year. So if things go very poorly, you don't have to put any money down for him. So kind of basically a year trial here with Zegras to see how things go. And you could even move him at the deadline if something like that comes up, if he is going to get you some value. But then on that defensive end, Drysdale coming up too, he's on his last year, and I think will be getting a pretty decent contract. I think that's kind of your youth development on the defensive side. And then the big thing, picking up Vladar from the Flyers, who only played 30 games, I believe, there, but had some pretty decent stats. So wouldn't surprise me if he gets the nod to play majority or over half I don't know if he's gonna be the clear starter, but I think we'll get a lot of playing time. So I think that'll be good not only for him, but with this team, I think that could be he could offer some stability in the goaltending spot. Obviously, we haven't really seen him in a starting goalie position, so you don't know how that transition is going to be, but I think that's a very solid pickup for them and not a lengthy contract, so not super high risk. It could be some high reward depending on how he fits into that role there. But I don't think you're really expecting a ton from this team, but I think you like the direction they're heading.
Especially with their shining draft pick, Porter Martone. Kind of forgot about him. Didn't forget about him necessarily, but forgot to say anything about him. I mean, last year for this Brampton Steelheads in the OHL, 98 points in 57 games played. They still have to put him on that contract. They still have to sign him. Right now they are negative in the salary cap. But Porter legitimately can be a player, I think, in the NHL this year if he can make that step up. I don't know what it looks like since he's in the OHL and stuff like that. But I think that's another really promising prospect. Him and Michkov, I feel like, could be great players down the road together. So that's encouraging. I feel like I said earlier, you're seeing them come out of a rebuild stage. You're seeing improvement, and I think that's really exciting.
Martone is committed to play at Michigan State, so he will be playing NCAA this coming year. But a lot to like about that pick. There were, as a Blackhawks fan, I heard talks of Martone getting picked all the way up at 3. Dropping to 6 for the Flyers is not a bad thing at all. I think, he could be a really solid player. Obviously, there were some things that had him out of the top 5, but I think will be a very good fit for Philadelphia. And obviously, they hope he gets some good competition in the NCAA, because that transition from the OHL to college is a big difference. So seeing how that plays out for him, I think will be a big thing for Philadelphia. That's the kind of the upside the bright future you can kind of see for Philadelphia if you play your cards right.
Yeah, and I think just talking in general about Philadelphia, I think this is what we're seeing with a lot of teams right now. The rebuild stage, the not that great defense, and the unstable goaltending. I mean, those are their really two big things, and like I said, a lot of teams right now are big. That's the big things. Goalies, big ticket items for ones that are solid, reliable, and I think, like John was saying, I think they might find something here for their goalie tandem. But as for their defense, I need to see a couple pickups before I say they're going to go too far anywhere.
Yeah, the Flyers definitely have gone away from their style of hockey that they used to be so well known for, the city of brotherly love. Just that attack mentality, that aggressiveness to get in there with the puck. Mitchkov showed that this year. He was pretty much the only player that really shone on that roster this year. And the Philadelphia Flyers have got to find a spark to play hockey again and make their way back towards the postseason, because it's been a while, and I'm afraid it's going to be a couple more years yet before Philadelphia Flyers fans get to dress out, get decked out in orange, and fill that Wells Fargo Stadium up, Wells Fargo Arena up for a playoff game. But it's coming, Flyers fans, and that's from a Penguins fan. So take it with a grain of salt.
I think Philadelphia probably will find themselves towards the bottom of the Metropolitan, but as a hockey fan, it'd be cool to see the Flyers moving back up in the next few years. The coolest reason for that would be to revive the rivalry between the Flyers and the Penguins, and those already now a number of years ago were some heated rivalry, and now these two teams find themselves towards the bottom of the Metropolitan. But now switching over to the Pittsburgh Penguins in a kind of unknown situation, kind of in between fully committing to a rebuild and still having, obviously, your captain, Sidney Crosby. So Penguins in an interesting spot. Interested to hear your guys' thoughts.
Oh, man. The Penguins have the worst GM in the NHL. I'm going to say it right now. Kyle Dubas, you can just retire, please. You're ruining our team. As a Penguins fan, a longtime Penguins fan since 2011, the Pittsburgh Penguins have never looked worse. We do not have goaltending. We have a collapsing defense on players that we've based the entire team off of. Chris Letang, Evgeny Malkin, and Sidney Crosby are probably all in their final years in a Penguins jersey. I can almost guarantee that this is Evgeny Malkin's final year. He will not be playing in a Penguins jersey next year, whether that means he goes back to Russia to play hockey or another team picks him up. But I do not see the Penguins re-signing him, and I do not see the Penguins keeping him. And to be perfectly honest, for at least the past 3 to 4 years, Evgeny Malkin is not playing hockey the way he used to. I've been very disappointed in his quality of play, and I'll be honest, I won't be upset if I see him leave. I do miss what it used to be. Going off of the rivalry between the Penguins and the Flyers, I remember going when the NHL was still on NBC, pulling up on a Saturday evening and watching the Flyers and Penguins beat each other to death on the ice with like 5 or 6 fights a game and a score of like 5-4. That was hockey. That rivalry and that kind of play was just so much fun to watch. Yes, as part of the stereotype of hockey, there is fights, although there is not fights near as much as there used to be anymore. We need more fights in the NHL. Bring the fights back. But anyways, the Penguins have got to turn things around, and Kyle Dubas is not the man to do it. A guy who keeps saying, we're not rebuilding, we're not rebuilding, we're not rebuilding. And then we go and get a bunch of draft picks every time we had an atrocious deadline and an atrocious draft. We got a couple of quality players on the draft that I could see making moves and growing. But, yeah, there's no future for the postseason as long as Kyle Dubas is a GM. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. I am very critical of Kyle Dubas because he has Toronto Maple Leafs background.
I think it's time for a rebuild. Like, you need to start that. Last episode, I talked about it for, I don't remember what team, on you can't start a rebuild too soon. I rephrase that. You can start a rebuild too soon. But right now, you need to start a rebuild for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course,
you can start one definitely too late.
You have Sidney Crosby, so like you can't justify a rebuild yet. But you have to rebuild.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, a very tough situation, and Chicago was in this a few years ago, and from a Blackhawks fan standpoint, the way they treated that by pushing it off to try to keep around Kane and Taves hurt them in the long run, pushed them back multiple years in a rebuild, and is making it harder to dig out of that. And I think the same thing is true with Pittsburgh, but with Sidney Crosby, you just feel so bad to try to... He's put up over a point per game for like a decade when he's been healthy, and it's so hard to justify being like okay with being bottom of the division, bottom of the league, when you have someone putting up those numbers. And just as hockey fans, you don't want to see that. Sidney Crosby is a very likable player, and I think there's very few people who have hate towards Sidney Crosby, and people want to see him, and I want to see him in another playoffs before he retires. I don't think that'll be happening in Pittsburgh. It's just such a tough situation because like you want what's best, but it's like what is best in this situation? Is it? And Crosby has to decide that too. You don't want to see Crosby leave. You'd like to see him there the whole time, but what's best for him? What's best for the team? And just with a lot of these guys, I think the biggest thing for them this year will be the goaltending. That'll affect their record pretty heavily. Regardless of if you're wanting to be a team that's competing more or a team that's not, like a team that's going into a rebuild, that goaltending is going to make a difference. Jari has shown himself to be a good goalie in prior years, not so much as of late. So it's not completely out of question to say he could maybe bounce back, but other than that, your goaltending is in a pretty rough situation. You're going to need somebody to step up, somebody to bounce back to make to I don't know, have a good goaltending here in Pittsburgh, and that makes your record, that flips your record by a lot of points and can affect a lot of things. I don't think it'll obviously make enough of a difference to pull the Penguins out of the bottom of the league.
The really hard thing with this is you have Sidney Crosby, obviously, like we've been saying, so you can't commit to that rebuild. And so you're in this in-between. It's very hard to decide what you're going to do. You should start a rebuild, but you really can't justify a rebuild quite yet. You have these guys, like you have Evgeny Malkin and Crosby. You have to let them run one more chance. You have to give them one more chance. I don't think it'll pan out. And then it's rebuild time. You rebuild around somebody. The Penguins don't have a justifiable player to build around. The only player I can see is Rutger McGroarty, who was in the AHL a lot of last season. I like his upside. He played 8 games in the NHL last season, put up 3 points. I feel like that's the closest thing they have to something to build around on a rebuild. I think this could be a very rough rebuild. Rebuilds are always rough, but some are easier than others. And this is going to be one of those that takes a long time. You've held on to these guys, to Crosby, and you have to. He's he's franchise talent. You have to hold on to him. But then you know you're going to get to this point at some point where you have him. You're not going to trade him. Yes, he has value, but you can't really trade him. So you can't really get value for him. You want him to retire as a Penguin, but you need to start the rebuild now.
I just want to say, if all the players on this team were in their prime, this would be the best team in NHL history. I mean, you got some of the biggest names. You've got Reichel, Rust, Carlson, Malkin, Getzel, Crosby, Letang. This is a good team if they were a young team. Now they're all getting past their prime. You look, the top 3 people have 30 or above goals. And after that, the goals cut in half. We've got 33, 35, 31, and then it drops all the way down to 16. We've got 3 people putting out your goals, and then the rest are, I mean, helping, but you need more than three people putting goals in the back of the net for an offense to run. And I love Crosby so much. And he's insane. He's got 91 points a year, 2 years away from retirement. I mean, it's crazy to see him work, and I just really wish he could go out with a better team, a bang or a something. But right now, I just don't see that with the Penguins.
Crosby is so impressive. Like, the numbers he puts up is so impressive. Putting up 91 points is impressive in itself. Putting up 91 points when you have nobody helping you out, really, outside of your top three, is even more impressive. And people talk about Alex Ovechkin, his goal scoring, obviously. Alex Ovechkin is so great over the course of his career. Crosby had a better year still now, like a lot better than Ovechkin. And you hear so much less about Crosby. And I think Crosby, obviously Hall of Famer, obviously, but like once his career is over too, one of the greatest players to ever play. So it's like, it just amplifies every decision in Pittsburgh because you feel like it's either disrespectful to him or to the fans. Like, you built up a fan base with Crosby and with these years of his career, and like, it's just such a hard spot to be in. I think, well, I guess I could ask you, Micah, like, as a Penguins fan, is there anything Dubas could really do in this situation, going one way or the other, that would like make a Penguins fan happy? Like, is there, at this point, is there a best option, or is it just kind of everything is kind of stings at this point?
Well, due to the fact that the goalie market in the NHL is so poor, we can't really do anything in the goalie front. But we could buy out Carlson's contract because I think that's what we need to do. I'm sorry, Erik Karlsson fans, and I love Erik Karlsson to death. Such a really good guy, good family man, all that good stuff. He's not a good hockey player anymore. The defensive mistakes that he makes in front of the net, already in front of a shaky goaltender, have led to a lot of issues in front of the net. Yeah, we need to buy out Erik Karlsson, and we need to try and see if we can get somebody good from Brian Rust. I want to keep Brian Rust, but I don't think we can. And if we can maybe get a high-powered defenseman or something, or another high-powered offender to replace Yevgeny Malkin once he leaves, that would be nice to do too. So we could do, I think, Dubas to appease some of the issues, go out and get a better goaltender and make some buyouts happen, because this fan base wants something to happen, and right now I don't know what it is that we got to do. Something needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about how like you can't really rebuild with Crosby, right? And I think if you're looking at the rebuild option as a fan of the Penguins, you're like, we need to start this. Like, if you're a rebuild guy, you know you need to start it, and you know you can't start it. And I think that's one of the scary things is, because like, I think they'll still try this year, but I don't think it'll do I don't think it'll do much, and then it turns into a wasted season where you're not rebuilding yet, but you're not getting better. And then the rebuild just prolongs itself. I feel like you could see them not rebuilding yet this season and still trying, which they should do. I think that's respectful to Crosby since he's still here. I think you kind of have to play hockey with him. You have to go try. I mean, you're always going to try, but like Gavin McKenna, I mean, he's a pretty good player. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, we talked a lot about kind of the tough spot Pittsburgh is in, and kind of I brought up also the Crosby and Ovechkin comparisons. The Washington Capitals were in a similar spot, I feel like, in the last few years, wondering what to do with an aging Ovi and like how you build around this team. But last year proved very much so that this team can play hockey at a very high level. Honestly, in my opinion, I don't look at this roster and see them being as good as they were. Like, in all seriousness, they exceeded my expectations by quite a lot. But yeah, so a few offseason moves, and yeah, after a quick playoff exit too, I think there's always conversation as what's next for the Washington Capitals, and obviously always in that conversation is how does Ovi play a role in that.
I mean, yeah, most of this you have more upside, because even when Ovechkin is gone, you don't have to go into a rebuild. You have a lot of age-friendly players on this team behind Ovechkin. I mean, Dylan Strome, he's on the older side, but he's still young. I mean, Brandon Duhaime, Minnesota Wild legend. Like, you have those guys that are on the cusp of getting to 30 and being those guys that you need on a team, but then you also have those young guys. I mean, and hopefully they progress because realistically, Ovechkin, let's be honest here, he's just about done. I don't think you'd see him play 2 more years. I just don't see that.
A lot of the rumors that said that he was going to be, this is going to be his final year, were debunked by him himself. So I think that he's an unrestricted free agent after this year, and I think that the Capitals are going to he's going to coerce them into signing him again. If he wants to still play hockey, he's not going to play anywhere else. Let's be honest. Alexander Ovechkin wants the Capital, always the Capital. He's not going anywhere. But I don't think he wants to stop playing in the NHL either because he knows how good he still is. Whether you think he's the greatest player of all time or not, the Washington Capitals are going to be just fine without him as long as they can find that team chemistry and do something with the players they have. Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson are both really good goaltenders. You have them for another 3 years at least. They're good when they're locked in. They're good goaltenders. So they can definitely carry this team as long as they find some good defense and just do something with the players that they have in place. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs this year, though. I think it's a one and done with them.
You
From
see,
last year.
I feel that too because you like this team, and I think that's the thing. Even if you see them make the playoffs, they're not going to do anything in the playoffs. I think it'd just be a first round exit. I don't think it'd be very exciting.
I think it's going to be, if they do make the playoffs, it's going to be what happened 2 years ago, where they got into the playoffs up from an empty net goal. But there's enough people to sore about that.
Yeah, I think they're it's a tough spot when you are a team coming off such a season like you had. You feel like you shouldn't have to make too many changes, but I also think you can't expect to have that same season with the same roster as last year. I don't want to fully say it was a fluke, but I don't think with the way the Metropolitan is progressing and all that, you can just expect to be first place with that same roster. You have to make some changes, and obviously every playoff team, to turn yourself from a playoff team to a cup contending team, there's just the little things that you gotta make, and who knows if Washington goes for it this year. You never know kind of how the season progresses, what moves they make during the year. I don't think it'll be a moveless year for the Capitals. I think they will be making some moves because I do think you kind of feel like you're in a win now. You only have Ovechkin for a few more years, and you have a team that just won the Metropolitan last year. So I feel like you're in a spot where you feel like you can go for it. And I think for a lot of reasons, the team does look pretty strong. I think Logan Thompson is a very good starting goaltender for the Capitals. I think it's going to be, I don't know how a 6-year contract will play out with Logan Thompson. I think that might be a little bit on the long end, but you've got your goalie, and yeah, I think this team is pretty well-rounded. Dylan Strome is incredibly underrated. He has bounced around the league and has been a pretty good role player in most places he's been, but was the leading scorer for this Capitals team, a team that won the Metropolitan Division, putting up point-per-game numbers. And I think that's a bright spot for this Capitals team because you still could have him for a number of years if you so desire. And I think he could be, not necessarily, he might be a little old to be a guy you build around after Ovi, but definitely you're a top 6 you can keep around for, and will be playing at a top 6 level for a good 5 more years plus. So yeah, I think the Capitals are in a good spot. I don't see them having the same year they had last year, but there's a good amount to like about them, and I think not only for this year, but they're in a good spot to not completely blow up in the next few years when some of their older guys start to leave.
I definitely do agree with that, and just bringing it back to Dylan Strome a second, you were saying he's jumped around being a role player, and I think he's found his place and his niche because he had a really good season, and I don't really see him slowing down next season. I mean, time will tell, but I see him being a really, really, really good asset next year for the Capitals. As for like Ovi and all that, I mean, time will tell. The older you get, the more things go up in the air. You don't know if they're going to be the same from year to year. I'm not saying he won't be. I'm not saying he's getting worse, but you can't just rely on him without a thought now. I mean, he's getting older, and
And
you
I mean,
gotta
he
see
didn't
some.
even he played well short of a full season this past year. So I think also at his age, that's a concern as well. You don't expect a full 82 probably from him. He's still putting up good numbers, obviously still over a point per game this past year, but well short of a full season. And somebody has to pick up that slack. And I think the Capitals have a lot of good role players, in all honesty. Outside of Ovechkin being the big name, none of these guys are really like big name NHL players, but a lot of very solid players. And I think obviously last year they proved that coming together and playing as a team and having a very, very good season. Yeah, I honestly don't know if you're a Capitals fan, if you're in the Capitals organization, what kind of changes you need to make to take that next step to try to, I don't know, make yourself a better opportunity in the playoffs and stuff. They have their enforcer. They have like sometimes that's the concern with teams getting to the playoffs and not having physicality. You have Tom Wilson, and you have some good role contributors even down to your bottom six. So it's a tough spot because you don't know exactly what you need, but I think that'll kind of reveal itself as the season goes on, and I think you could see them be fairly active at the deadline. Fairly active, not large moves. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting season. Could be a really big boom or bust season for the Capitals. Do you cash in on kind of last year, or is it a regression year already this year? So with that brings us to the end of the Metropolitan Division. We're now halfway done covering all the teams in the NHL. So pretty exciting place to be. We're going to jump into kind of our final division predictions. Where we kind of see everyone landing in the Metropolitan. We've touched a little bit broadly on where these teams finish, but now we'll kind of get into our reasoning of where they finish and why.
I think the East Metropolitan is going to be a fun division to watch. I think that it's hard to tell who's going to be in the top three because there's a lot of players, a lot of teams that could be there. But let's see here. I'm going to go Carolina Hurricanes at the top. I'll do them in the first. I'll have the Washington Capitals in second, Rangers in third, Jackets in fourth, New Jersey in fifth, Flyers and Pittsburgh at the bottom, along with the Islanders, if I already didn't see them. That's kind of quick mold together really fast, but I think that obviously the Islanders, Penguins, and Flyers are not really going to be chasing down the postseason this year, and I think that the Carolina Hurricanes have the best chance of winning the Metropolitan this year because I don't know if the Capitals can do it again. And I think that Columbus and New Jersey are probably the most up in the air teams for where they finish in the Metropolitan this year.
Yeah, I'll go next. It's a very, like you were saying, very tough decision to make for placing it. It always is, but I feel like with this division, it's a lot harder. But I'm also gonna say Carolina at the number one. And then I'm also gonna say Washington. But then I'm gonna go New Jersey, New York Rangers, then Columbus, and then we're gonna go Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and the Islanders.
All right, so for me, predicting this division was a little bit, I feel, easier than the vast division. So I'm kind of surprised that I still differ pretty drastically from you guys. This division kind of breaks into three sections for me, really. I think, in my opinion, your 1 and 2 are kind of locked up. Then your 3 through 5 are kind of, those teams are kind of locked in that position. And then your bottom 3 kind of locked in that position. So I have the Devils winning the Metropolitan. I think there's a lot of upside for the Devils. I have Carolina in the 2 spot. Capitals dropping down to 3. Still a playoff team. And then you get into your kind of borderline playoff teams. I think the Rangers are going to be right there in 4. I have the Islanders taking a step up into 5. But I could see them finishing lower, kind of swapping places with the Blue Jackets, who I have in the 6th spot. And then kind of that bottom 2 is going to be Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Yeah, I could go either way on that. For the sake of the video, I'll say Pittsburgh and then Philadelphia in last, but I could see Philadelphia having a better year than that with kind of the younger guys if some people have breakout years. But yeah, that's what I would say for the Metropolitan Division. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch, though. And like I said multiple times in these episodes, there's some wild card teams in here that can really shake things up if they have a better or worse year than I'm really expecting. That could really switch a lot of things around in the standings.
Yeah, the Eastern Conference is going to be kind of fun this year. I still think the Western Conference is better. I will always think that. But the Eastern Conference, I think the Atlantic does keep both wild cards. So I think you only have the top 3 making the playoffs out of the Metropolitan. And I think the top 3 is going to be New Jersey, Carolina, and Columbus. I think Columbus is going to be... We talked about them for a while. Last episode, their upside I like. I think they're on the way up. Them and Washington could be interchangeable, but I see Columbus beating Washington out for that 3rd seed.
The way Washington played against Columbus this year, I would totally agree with that.
Also, New Jersey being the best team in the Metropolitan, I think is a obvious one. I think if they stay healthy, like we talked about, I think they'll be there. But yeah, New Jersey, Carolina, Columbus, Washington. Then I'm going to have to go Islanders, Rangers, Flyers, and Pittsburgh. And I think Pittsburgh could be one of those teams that has a chance in the lottery.
Don't bet on.
That has a chance
yes, yeah.
in the lottery.
Going for the lottery, yeah.
I think
We got our eyes set on McKenna, hands down. We've been talking about that. I've heard a lot of rumbles about that. So it's not like we're going to be trying, but I think that's where we're probably going to be sitting. So I totally agree with that, although I think Jeremiah's predictions line up the best, I'll be honest.
So as the predictions, our standing predictions show, the Metropolitan can be a very interesting and could go a lot of different ways. So let us know your guys' opinions in the comments where you see the Metropolitan Division going. We've also already done the Atlantic Division, so if you haven't checked out that video, probably go check that one out as well. If you want our full deep dive of the whole Eastern Conference, all those episodes are out now. So we thank you guys for watching. Western Conference is up next. I believe we'll start in the Central Division. So some more fun predictions to talk about and directions to go. So thank you guys again for watching. Have a good one. Peace.